Welcome to the next installment in our Samco Power Accounting Tips and Tricks video series. This episode we're going to talk about user-defined fields in the purchasing module. Now, similar to that in accounts receivable, accounts payable, inventory, Samco Power Accounting also allows you to capture information specific to your needs, in this case during the purchasing or receiving process. And this information can be included in your forms, your purchase orders, or your receivers, or simply stored for future reference. So let's get to it. First thing we're going to need to do is enable the feature. We do this by going into purchasing, F2 for more selections, setup and control information, and we're going to page down until we see the use user-defined fields option, and we're going to change that to a yes, and we'll press enter to complete the process. So now there's a new menu option here, 7 user-defined fields, and this is where we set up our user-defined fields. So we click on that and enter. And I've preset some in advance here for you so that we can see and you don't have to watch me type a bunch of stuff in. You can have 4 different types of fields. We can have literal fields, which are text. We can have date fields. We can have numeric fields. And we can also have fields where you set up a table and can be used for selection from a table. So I've set this up here so that all of my fields that are information is gathered from during the purchasing process. I've got those on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side I have all my fields where entry of data is done during the receiving process. Now all these fields are incorporated together in the same screens. However, I've done this just so that it's easier to manage and to add to one area as opposed to the other. So let's add ourselves a new user-defined field. So we're going to go into number 4. This will be a field that's done during the purchase order purchasing process. However, you can enter any of these fields in both, but I've just done it this way for just for the way we want to do business. So the first thing I'm going to add here the title. This is what it'll appear as the title for the field, and I'm going to call this the requested by. So let's say, for example, we had special requests were being made by people in the company. So I'm going to have a requested by field. It is not a key, so I'm not going to have it as a search field. Type of field, here's where I can either see them on the options on the bottom. I enter a C if this is a code field. I'll show you how to do that in a bit. I enter D if this is a date field, L if it's a literal or just a text entry field, and N if it's a numeric field. So if I set it as a D for a date field, that means I can only enter a date, and I can also use the question mark to look up a calendar. If I enter N, I can only enter a number, and it'll allow me to define what that number looks like. Like, is it 5 integers and 2 decimals? Is it 8 integers and 4 decimals? So I can design it the way I want, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. So I'm going to say this is a code field. So up pops a window for me to maintain my codes, and I'm going to say John Smith. So you can see it's pretty easy to do, and this will be Elaine Parsons. Not sure why, but it just defaults to whatever I entered before. So there I go. I got a couple of values. I can just keep entering. So this is where you're going to maintain these fields as well. So if you add more people to your list, this is where you're going to add them. Super important here is that these tables are only maintained inside Purchasing Plus. So there's no relationship between this and, say, your users or your salesmen or what have you. So these are only maintained here in the purchasing module in the user-defined area. So I press Tab when I'm finished, and there I've added it. So I'll show you, like, if I wanted to maintain that, add another user, I would go into the requested by field, and up it would come, and I would go, you'll see at the bottom there, I can press F2 to add, and we'll add good old Ray Jones to the list. and we're good. So now we've got 3 people in our list. I can also add, we talked about a date field, and I can say date requested, and this is not a key, and this is a date field, and it'll default to the length of 8. As I promised you, I would show you about numeric fields. So let's say I wanted to change my estimated freight. I go to field 3, and I'm going to say 6 for my length and 2 for my for my decimal. So if I didn't want decimals, I could just enter 0 and I wouldn't get decimals. All right, so now we've set them up. With of note, with literal fields, the maximum length is 50. And the difference again is with literals, I can enter any information I want, any characters, letters, numbers, special characters, doesn't really matter. With numeric, it has to be a number. With the date, it is going to be a date entry field. And with code, it can only be what you've entered into the code table. So there we go. I've set up all my user-defined fields. I press enter. From this point, I can print off a list of these if I want. It's a general list function. Now, let's go look at how we can use these new fields that we have. First area is when you're creating a purchase order. So if I go into the purchase requests function, I'm going to start up a new purchase order. All right, and through the miracle of modern technology, we've entered our first screen. Now when we press enter at field number to change, you'll notice now all of our user-defined fields are listed. These top 5 here are the ones we entered on the left-hand side of the screen. Those are the ones we're going to enter during the purchasing process. And the next ones on the bottom, those are the ones that were on the right-hand side, and those are we're going to use during the receiving process. Again, I can enter any of these fields now if I want to. I'm not restricted to that. It was just how I wanted to see it in the setup. So the order taker, let's say it was Wendy, took my order. She gave me a confirmation number of 60447. We're estimating the freight to be about $25. And was this requested by in our office? I can just press enter to go past it. I'll go back up. I can put a question mark in, and there's that list that we set up. So I'm going to say John asked for this. And again, this is a date field, so I can either type in a date like that, or I can use the lookup function and putting in a question mark, and it pops a calendar. And let's say I can go select the date that he requested this. And again, since the rest of these I'm only going to be using for the receiving process, I can press the F1 key and skip past them. I don't have to enter them in. So there we go. I've entered in my user-defined fields for my purchase order. The rest of it is a normal purchase order. You enter your products, costs, etc. And we'll skip past that. All right, so we've got our purchase order in. Now let's do the receiving on that PO, and we'll show you how that feature works in there. So we're going to receive our purchase order, put a question mark in there. There it is. Copy the PO. I go to the next screen. You'll see here's all that information we entered in the purchase order. Now I can plug in the information I need that's specific to the receiving. So I can say that Ian received this. There was one skid, waybill number. I get off of the whatever. I've set up a table here for whether it's damaged. I'll say no, there was no damage, and then I've got some other fields. So all of these fields, again, I can either print these on my purchase order or on my receiver in this case, or I can just have them there for future reference. I might have, say, damaged, yes, no, be something important, so it does print on my receiver. All of the other information is just there so we know who did what. And then I just receive as I normally would receive, and we're going to skip past that, and we'll show you where this information can show up in other places. Okay, so we've entered in a purchase order, we've entered in a receiver, and we've added some user-defined information to those forms. where else is this going to show up? Obviously, as I said earlier, it's going to show up on the documents themselves, your purchase order, and on your receiver form. It also will show up in the view function. So if we go into Purchasing Plus and click on View, and we'll start off with a purchase order, so click on Open POs. Let's bring up a PO here, put a question mark in, we'll select a purchase order. Now we press the F5 key for the header information. Shows the header info for this purchase order. We press page down, and this shows us all of our user-defined fields and the data that we entered there. So this is available at any time and to anyone who has access to this particular field. Likewise, if we go over to the View and Received PO History function, put in a question mark, select a receiver, and same concept, pressed F6 in this case. There's our header. Page down shows us our user-defined fields for this receiver. So again, really easy to set up, really easy to use, and access the information that you've entered in. So that's it for this. Be sure to check out samco.com for more tips and tricks, and you have yourself a great day.